The world knew Mr. and Mrs. Sterling as titans, architects of empires forged in steel and ambition. Their names synonymous with unparalleled success and impenetrable wealth. Their lives were a meticulously crafted tableau of luxury, influence, and the quiet satisfaction of having tamed the modern world to their will. From their sprawling estate overlooking the Pacific to their private jets that whisked them across continents, every facet of their existence screamed invincibility. Yet beneath the polished veneer of their gilded reality, a shadow, cold and relentless, had fallen, consuming their most precious treasure, their only child, Lily. Their bright-eyed, spirited Lily was fading. The first whispers of trouble had been dismissed as childhood ailments, easily remedied by the best pediatricians money could hire. But as the symptoms deepened, a persistent fatigue that stole her laughter, unexplained fevers that burned away her vivacity, and a gradual chilling loss of motor control, the whispers became a roar. Lily was diagnosed with an ultra-rare, debilitating genetic condition, a malevolent anomaly woven deep into the delicate tapestry of her DNA. It was a disease so obscure, so aggressive, that it defied comprehension, a cruel irony for a child whose parents believed no obstacle was insurmountable. A frantic, global quest began, a desperate mobilization of resources that dwarfed philanthropic endeavors. Mr. Sterling, usually a man of steel and calculation, moved with a raw, primal urgency, driven by a fear he had never known. Mrs. Sterling, whose poise was legendary, clung to hope with a fragile tenacity, her elegant hands now clasped in silent prayer, her nights consumed by a terrifying vigilance beside Lily's bed. Top specialists, hailed as medical deities in their respective fields, were flown in from every corner of the globe. From the sterile, cutting-edge laboratories of Zurich to the experimental clinics in Boston, no expense was spared, no theory left unexplored. Teams of geneticists pored over Lily's genome, immunologists devised complex drug cocktails, and neurologists mapped the subtle, insidious progression of the illness within her delicate system. Each specialist, each groundbreaking treatment, each flicker of hope was met with the same agonizing conclusion: failure. The disease, relentless and indifferent, continued its slow, inexorable march. Their vast fortune, once a symbol of their power, had become a mocking monument to their helplessness. Millions, then tens of millions, poured into research, into consultations, into experimental therapies that promised revolutionary breakthroughs, only to deliver crushing disappointment. They could buy the best, access the most exclusive, command the most brilliant minds, yet none of it mattered. Their wealth, which had always been their shield, their weapon, their solution, was utterly useless against this microscopic enemy. It was a bitter, soul-destroying realization that their carefully constructed world built on control and acquisition was crumbling before an adversary that did not recognize money or power. Lily, once a whirlwind of energy, now lay increasingly still, her bright eyes clouded with a weariness that was heartbreaking to behold. Her once robust immune system faltered, her muscles weakened, and her breath grew shallow. Each medical report delivered a fresh blow. Each exhausted doctor's solemn pronouncement felt like a nail in the coffin of their dreams. The grand, opulent rooms of their estate, once filled with the echoes of joyous family gatherings, now resonated with a suffocating silence, broken only by the quiet hum of medical equipment and the hushed, grief-laden conversations of the Sterlings. They were trapped in a luxurious cage, watching their daughters slip away, their immense power rendered meaningless by the relentless progression of a mysterious illness. A profound, aching despair had settled over them, colder and heavier than any winter, leaving them with nothing but the terrifying echo of their own impotence. The doctor's grim pronouncements had become a chilling rhythm, each echo in the vast, empty halls of the Sterling estate, a further confirmation of their impending loss. Lily's small frame, once vibrant and resilient, was now a fragile vessel, her breath the shallow whisper against the oppressive silence. Her skin, once flushed with childhood's rosy glow, grew pale and translucent, revealing the delicate blue tracery of veins beneath. The medical equipment, a testament to modern science's failure, beeped and hummed, monitoring a life that seemed to be slowly, irrevocably extinguishing. Amelia would spend hours by her daughter's bedside, her hand clinging to Lily's increasingly cold one, a silent plea hanging in the air. David, ever the man of action, felt a corrosive helplessness consume him, his vast network of influence unable to summon a single thread of hope. Every resource, every connection, every last shred of their formidable power had been thrown against this invisible enemy, only to be met with relentless, crushing defeat. The ticking clock of Lily's fading life amplified their terror, urging them towards an even more desperate measure. Driven to the precipice of madness by grief and unyielding love, the Sterlings launched an unprecedented worldwide appeal. News channels across continents blared headlines of the ailing millionaire heiress, her cherubic face a haunting image on every screen.
A staggering, astronomical reward, a sum that dwarfed entire national budgets, was publicly offered to anyone who could provide a viable, verifiable solution. Their private jets crisscrossed the globe, carrying medical liaison teams to every renowned research institution, every innovative biotech lab, every expert from every specialized field imaginable. The internet hummed with a torrent of responses, a chaotic deluge of proposals ranging from cutting-edge genetic therapies to audacious experimental surgeries, from ancient herbal concoctions to bewildering spiritual rituals. Each lead was meticulously investigated, every theory cautiously explored, every potential cure tested with frantic urgency. Yet amidst the overwhelming noise, the promising whispers quickly faded into the stark reality of more dead ends. The sheer volume of suggestions only served to highlight the profound absence of a true answer, leaving the Sterlings adrift in a sea of false hopes, each one a fresh stab of disappointment. The world, for all its scientific marvels and boundless ambition, seemed to have no answer for Lily. But unbeknownst to the frantic, interconnected world of modern medicine and limitless wealth, far from the blinding glare of advanced technology and sterile labs, an entirely different kind of existence thrived. Tucked away within the primordial folds of ancient, mist-shrouded mountains, where peaks scraped the very belly of the clouds and rivers carved their paths through millennia-old stone, lay a secluded community. Generations had lived here, untouched by the relentless march of progress, their lives interwoven with the rhythm of the earth and the whispers of the wind. They were the descendants of a lineage that predated written history, guardians of forgotten traditions, their wisdom etched not in textbooks, but in the living tapestry of their environment. Their homes were simple, hewn from natural materials, their days dictated by the sun and moon, their knowledge passed down through generations around flickering hearth fires. They possessed a profound, almost mystical understanding of the natural world, identifying healing properties in roots, leaves, and minerals that mainstream science had either long forgotten or never discovered. Whispers of this community, of their unique healing practices and astonishing remedies, occasionally drifted down from the lofty peaks into the bustling valleys below. Tales of seemingly miraculous recoveries from ailments deemed incurable by modern doctors would surface in remote villages, spoken in hushed tones, imbued with an aura of myth and wonder. A child snatched from the brink of death by a rare mountain herb, a chronic illness vanished by a ritual cleansing performed under a specific lunar phase, a broken spirit mended by chants echoing through sacred groves. These stories, however, were rarely taken seriously by the wider world. When they did manage to pierce the impenetrable wall of scientific dogma, they were quickly dismissed by mainstream medical professionals as mere folklore, superstitious ramblings of an isolated, uneducated people. The concepts were too outlandish,
too unquantifiable, too far removed from controlled trials and peer-reviewed journals to warrant any serious investigation. In an age where verifiable data and empirical evidence reigned supreme, the intuitive, holistic wisdom of the mountain dwellers was simply categorized as quaint, harmless, and utterly irrelevant to the grave challenges facing humanity, such as the mysterious illness slowly claiming Lily Sterling. The gulf between their two worlds was vast, seemingly unbridgeable, one defined by the relentless pursuit of progress, the other by the profound reverence for the past. The stark dismissal by the scientific establishment of anything remotely unquantifiable created an impenetrable barrier. Yet within the vast labyrinthine institutions, a flicker of dissent, a whisper of alternative thought persisted. It resided not in the hallowed halls of celebrated professors, but in the dusty corners of forgotten archives and in the restless mind of Dr. Eris Thorne, a junior ethnobotanist whose career was barely a fledgling bird attempting to fly. Eris, whose own unconventional upbringing had instilled in him a healthy skepticism of absolute certainties, had been drawn to the Sterling's desperate plea like a moth to a distant, flickering flame. While his colleagues meticulously dissected genetic sequences and modeled molecular pathways, Eris found himself increasingly drawn to the fringes, to the anomalies, to the things science couldn't yet explain. His personal interest, bordering on obsession, led him down a less traveled path, through ancient texts and obscure anthropological journals, away from the cutting-edge labs and into the quiet solemnity of forgotten knowledge. He was an outlier, often ridiculed for his romantic leanings, but his curiosity was a relentless current, pulling him deeper. It was amidst a collection of brittle leather-bound volumes, tucked away in the deepest recesses of the university's special collections, a section so rarely frequented that the air itself felt heavy with the dust of ages, that Eris stumbled upon it. A small, unassuming volume, its title faded, its pages yellowed and fragile, detailed the ethnographic observations of a 19th-century explorer. The explorer, a man whose ambition had led him into the uncharted territories of the world's highest peaks, had spent years documenting the practices of a secluded mountain community.
The descriptions were vivid, almost fantastical. Intricate herbal concoctions brewed under specific celestial alignments, healing rituals performed by elders whose hands were said to mend not just flesh, but the very essence of one's spirit, the use of rare, luminous flora found only in the highest, most inaccessible altitudes. What truly arrested Eris's attention, however, were the repeated mentions of a specific celestial dew and the song of life, a melodic chant said to resonate with the Earth's core, capable of awakening dormant healing mechanisms within the body, even in cases deemed terminal. The explorer's accounts, though written in flowery, archaic language, painted a picture of a community whose understanding of life and healing far transcended the mechanistic view of modern medicine. They spoke of energy flows, of balance, of the interconnectedness of all living things, concepts that resonated with Eris's nascent fringe theories about the body's innate regenerative capacities being suppressed by environmental and psychological stressors. Excited yet cautious, Eris presented his findings to the lead medical team, a formidable assembly of world-renowned specialists. Dr. Evelyn Reed, the Sterling's chief geneticist, listened with a polite, almost pitying smile. "Dr. Thorne," she began, her voice smooth as polished stone, "we appreciate your thoroughness, but while fascinating from an anthropological perspective, these are just stories, superstitious ramblings. We're dealing with a genetic breakdown, not a broken spirit mended by chance. We need empirical data, not folklore." Others chimed in, their dismissals ranging from gentle condescension to outright mockery. "Are you suggesting we send a team of highly trained medical professionals to chant at a dying child, Dr. Thorne?" one prominent neurologist scoffed. The idea was absurd, an insult to their collective intelligence, a desperate reach into the abyss of unproven pseudoscience. Eris left the meeting defeated, the weight of their cynicism pressing down on his nascent hope. He knew his career would suffer for this deviation, but the image of Lily, fading away, haunted him. Yet unbeknownst to the clinical experts, the Sterlings, particularly Mrs. Sterling, had been listening. The public face of their despair was always Mr. Sterling, the powerful businessman. But beneath her composed exterior, Mrs. Sterling was a tempest of raw maternal anguish. She had heard the dismissals, the cold clinical rejections of folklore, but something in Dr. Thorne's quiet conviction, in his passionate, almost desperate defense of the ancient texts, had resonated deeply within her. It was the absolute, unyielding certainty of modern medicine's failure that had opened her mind to the impossible. When Dr. Reed unequivocally declared that all conventional avenues had been exhausted, it wasn't just a medical pronouncement, it was a death knell. Mrs. Sterling remembered the way Dr. Thorne's eyes had held a glint of something beyond scientific method, a spark of desperate human hope. She approached her husband, her voice low and firm. "We've tried everything, John. Every single thing they've put in front of us, and Lily is still fading. What if Eris is right? What if there's even a 1 in a million chance?" Mr. Sterling, his usual pragmatic demeanor crumbling under the weight of his daughter's impending loss, hesitated. The idea was preposterous, a wild goose chase, but he looked into his wife's pleading eyes that mirrored his own bottomless sorrow, and saw the last embers of hope flickering there. What did they have to lose? Within days, a highly specialized, though discreet, team was assembled. It wasn't the full contingent of Lily's doctors, who still scoffed at the notion, but rather a small elite group of logistics experts, a single, open-minded medical physician, and, at Mrs. Sterling's insistence, Dr. Eris Thorne himself. Their destination was an unmapped valley, a journey that began with private jets slicing through the upper atmosphere, then transitioned to rugged helicopters battling treacherous mountain winds, and finally, after the air became too thin and the terrain too unforgiving, continued on foot, guided by satellite imagery and Eris's meticulously translated ancient maps. The tract was arduous, a stark reminder of the immense chasm separating their world of advanced technology from the primeval wilderness they were entering. The air grew thinner, the silence deeper, broken only by the crunch of boots on loose scree and the distant cries of unseen raptors. As they finally descended into the hidden valley, a hush fell over the team. Lush, vibrant greenery, unlike anything they had ever witnessed, carpeted the slopes. Ancient trees, their branches draped with luminous mosses, towered over crystalline streams. It was a place untouched by time, radiating a palpable, almost ethereal energy. The villagers, a people whose faces bore the lines of wisdom and hard living, were far from welcoming. Their attire was simple, woven from natural fibers, their eyes deep and watchful. They emerged from their dwellings of stone and timber, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and deep-seated suspicion. News of outsiders rarely reached this sanctuary, and the sight of modern equipment, even discreetly carried, was an immediate flag. A group of elders, distinguished by their intricately braided hair and the weight of ancestral knowledge in their bearing, formed a silent, unyielding barrier. They spoke a dialect Eris had only partially deciphered from the texts, a language rich with metaphors and natural imagery.
The team's interpreter, a linguist flown in specifically for the mission, struggled to bridge the cultural gap. Through halting translations, the Sterling's plea was relayed: a dying child, a last hope, an astronomical reward. But the villagers seemed impervious to the lure of wealth. Their gazes were not on the offered gold, but on the team's uneasy faces, on the blatant desperation that clung to them like a scent. One elder, his eyes like ancient polished obsidian, finally spoke, his voice resonating with a quiet power that commanded immediate silence. His words, filtered through the interpreter, were stark and uncompromising. "The mountain gives, and the mountain takes. We do not meddle with the natural order for trinkets or promises born of fear. Our ways are not for trade, nor for those who do not understand the breath of the living earth. The air thickened with unspoken tension. The modern world, with all its scientific might and material wealth, stood utterly powerless before the unwavering resolve of a people rooted in traditions deeper than time itself. The gulf, once thought unbridgeable, now seemed to stretch into an infinite abyss. The team, exhausted and dejected, realized the true scale of their challenge. Their desperation was palpable, but it was clear that the villagers saw it not as an appeal, but as an intrusion, a demand made by those who had forgotten how to listen to anything but their own clamoring needs. The fate of Lily Sterling, dangling by the thinnest thread, now rested on navigating a cultural landscape more treacherous and unfathomable than any biological mystery. The elder's words hung in the crisp mountain air, a final, unyielding decree. The modern team, with their sterile equipment and urgent pleas, recoiled as if struck. Defeat, stark and absolute, washed over them. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, usually bastions of controlled power, looked utterly broken, their faces etched with a grief so profound that it seemed to pull the light from the already dimming afternoon. The villagers, their faces a tapestry of ancient wisdom and suspicion, began to disperse, their quiet movements echoing the finality of their chief's refusal. They melted back into the shadows of their ancient homes, leaving the outsiders isolated, exposed, and profoundly alone in their despair. The vast expanse of the valley, once a beacon of desperate hope, now felt like a cold, indifferent tomb. The Sterling's team exchanged glances of abject surrender. Their mission, it seemed, had catastrophically failed. Yet amidst the retreating figures, one young woman lingered, her eyes fixed not on the retreating expedition vehicles, nor on the alien technology they carried, but solely on the distraught parents. Her name was Elara, and she was known in the community not for any position of power, but for a quiet, almost ethereal connection to the land and the whispers of her ancestors. Unadorned by the trappings of the modern world, her simple woven garments and braided hair spoke of a life lived in harmony with the cycles of nature, a life utterly incomprehensible to the world the Sterlings inhabited. While others saw an intrusion, a brazen demand from those who had lost their way, Elara saw something else entirely. Her gaze, deep and knowing like the mountain spring, pierced through the layers of wealth and status, straight into the raw, pulsating wound of parental agony. She felt the vibration of their sorrow, a discord in the intricate symphony of life as acutely as she felt the tremors of an approaching storm or the silent growth of a seed beneath the earth. The Sterlings, oblivious to the quiet departure of most villagers, were lost in their own abyss. Mrs. Sterling sagged against her husband, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs that felt more devastating than any outcry. Mr. Sterling held her, his own jaw clenched, eyes wide with unshed tears, staring at the distant peaks as if seeking an answer from the heavens themselves. They had offered everything, risked everything, only to be met by an impenetrable wall of tradition and principle. It was in this moment of utter desolation, when all their carefully constructed defenses crumbled, that Elara's presence began to register, not consciously, but as a subtle shift in the oppressive atmosphere. She stood slightly apart, a slender silhouette against the rugged backdrop, her posture emanating a stillness that felt both ancient and profoundly empathetic. Her eyes, pools of calm in the swirling chaos of their grief, never left them. There was no judgment in her gaze, no hardened resistance like the others. Instead, a peculiar current seemed to emanate from her, an unbidden, unexplainable warmth that began to seep into the edges of the Sterling's raw despair. It was not a physical touch, nor a spoken word, but a silent acknowledgement, a shared breath of humanity across an otherwise insurmountable cultural chasm. The air around them, still heavy with the recent rejection, now carried a faint, almost imperceptible tremor of something different, something unexpected. For a fleeting moment, as Mrs. Sterling lifted her tear-streaked face, her eyes met Elara's. In that brief, silent exchange, a flicker of solace, as fragile as a butterfly's wing, touched her ravaged heart. It was a comfort neither asked for nor understood, a whisper against the roar of their tragedy, hinting at a connection that defied logic, and dissolved, if only for an instant, the crushing weight of their helplessness. Elara remained, a solitary sentinel, her presence a silent question mark against the village's unwavering resolve.
The silent acknowledgement between Elara and Mrs. Sterling had been fleeting, yet it had ignited a spark within Elara that refused to be extinguished. She had witnessed the Sterling's anguish, not just as an abstract concept, but as a visceral, heartbreaking reality. Their wealth, their technology, their army of learned specialists, none of it could staunch the flow of their despair. Lily's pain was palpable, a fragile, fading light that seemed to call to Elara's innate understanding of life's delicate balance. The village elders' resistance, though born of deep-seated distrust and a fierce protectiveness of their ancient ways, felt like a heavy shroud to Elara. She respected their traditions, revered the wisdom passed down through generations, but she also saw the universal language of suffering, a plea that transcended cultural divides. That evening, as the Sterling's medical convoy bustled with hushed consultations and frantic data analysis, Elara moved like a shadow. She had spent her life observing, listening, learning from the rustle of leaves and the murmur of mountain streams. Now she observed the sterile, precise movements of the doctors, their faces etched with the cold certainty of insurmountable scientific fact. Their jargon was alien, their instruments gleaming and complex, but the underlying tremor of their defeat was a language she understood perfectly. A decision solidified within her, quiet but unyielding. It was a choice born not of hubris, but of a profound sense of duty, a whisper from her ancestors urging her to act. She knew the risks, the ridicule, the anger, the potential failure that could further cement the outsider's disbelief in everything her people held sacred. Yet, the image of Lily's pale face, the flicker of life struggling to persist, compelled her. She approached the temporary medical tent, a beacon of harsh artificial light in the encroaching twilight. Dr. Eris Thorne, the Sterling's lead physician, a man whose reputation preceded him across continents, was reviewing charts with a grim expression, surrounded by a cluster of equally distinguished specialists. Their conversation was a low, urgent hum, punctuated by words like degeneration, systemic failure, and unresponsive. Elara stepped forward, her simple, hand-woven garment a stark contrast to their tailored scrubs, her bare feet silent on the packed earth. Her presence was initially unnoticed, then dismissed as a local curiosity. But when she spoke, her voice soft, yet surprisingly clear, cutting through the dense medical dialogue, all eyes turned to her. "I can help the child," she said, her gaze steady, meeting Dr. Thorne's piercing blue eyes without flinching. "My ancestors carried a song, a chant that speaks to the spirit of the body, that can mend what is broken from within. It is not medicine as you know it, but a harmony with life itself." A collective snort of disbelief rippled through the medical team. Dr. Thorne, a man who had pioneered countless breakthroughs in genetic medicine, merely raised an eyebrow, a flicker of professional irritation crossing his face. "Young woman," he began, his tone patronizing, "we appreciate your concern, but this is a critical medical situation. We are dealing with advanced cellular degradation and organ failure, not folklore. Your song is utterly unscientific, unproven, and frankly irrelevant to the biochemical complexities we face." One of the younger specialists chuckled outright, muttering something about primitive superstition. "Our science, miss," another doctor interjected, struggling to recall her name. "Our science is built on millennia of observation, empirical data, and rigorous testing.
We have exhausted every known treatment, every pharmaceutical, every cutting-edge therapy. There is no mystical chant that can rewrite DNA or reverse disease progression. We understand you mean well, but you are out of your depth." Elara remained calm, unyielding in the face of their derision. "Life is more than what your instruments can measure," she countered gently, but with an unwavering conviction. "The ancient knowledge speaks of frequencies, of resonances that can reawaken the body's own power to heal. It is within all of us, waiting to be called." She didn't press the point of a unique blood type, sensing that her initial claim was already far beyond their comprehension, but the underlying implication of her deep connection to her lineage and its unique aspects remained. Mr. Sterling, who had been observing the exchange from the back, stepped forward, his face a mask of profound exhaustion and barely contained fury at the doctor's callous dismissal. He had listened to their pronouncements of doom for months, watched his daughter fade before his eyes. He had seen their certainty, their knowledge crumble to dust. "Dr. Thorne," he said, his voice dangerously low, "with all due respect, your science has failed us, spectacularly." He turned to Elara. His eyes, though still clouded with skepticism, now held a sliver of desperation, a tiny spark of a mad, impossible hope. "What exactly do you propose? How would this chant work?" Mrs. Sterling joined him, her hand gripping his arm, her gaze fixed on Elara. The fleeting solace she had felt earlier now surfaced, a fragile anchor in the stormy sea of her grief. "We have nothing left to lose," she whispered, her voice raw. "Absolutely nothing." Dr. Thorne's jaw tightened. "Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, I cannot in good conscience endorse such a preposterous, unproven method. It could be dangerous. It could exacerbate her condition. It offers false hope, and it is a blatant disregard for medical ethics."
He gestured expansively at his team. "These are the brightest minds in the world, dedicated to your daughter's well-being. And what have the brightest minds in the world achieved for Lily?" Mr. Sterling shot back, his frustration boiling over. "A death sentence. I'm sorry, doctor, but we are beyond conventional ethics and scientific comfort. We are facing the unimaginable. If there is even a 1 in a million chance, a whisper of a possibility, we will take it. We have to." His gaze swept over his wife's tear-stained face, then returned to Elara's serene expression. The very absurdity of the situation seemed to strip away the layers of his modern, logical mind, exposing the raw, primal instinct of a parent fighting for their child's life. "Tell us, Elara," he urged, his voice heavy with the weight of their despair. "What do you need?" The air in the tent crackled with an almost tangible tension. The doctors exchanged aghast glances, their professional pride wounded, their scientific dogma challenged by the desperate plea of parents drowning in grief. It was an unprecedented, reckless decision, a leap of faith into the unknown, driven by the most powerful human emotion. They knew it was irrational, unscientific, perhaps even dangerous. But in the face of inevitable tragedy, rationality had lost its hold. The Sterlings, stripped bare of all illusions by their daughter's imminent demise, had chosen to gamble everything on the most unexpected, the most improbable, and the most bewildering of last resorts. Elara, still and resolute, simply looked at them, a faint, almost imperceptible nod her only response. The true battle, the clash of worlds, was only just beginning. The sterile environment of the medical tent, usually a bastion of scientific precision, felt utterly alien, almost hostile to Elara. Wires, screens, and the rhythmic beeping of machines formed a stark contrast to the rustling leaves and whispering winds of her valley. Yet she stood composed, her gaze unwavering as Mr. Sterling, driven by a primal parental instinct, defied every scientific principle known to his esteemed medical team. "Tell us, Elara." His voice, heavy with despair, cut through the tension. The doctors, still reeling from the Sterling's irrational decision, exchanged incredulous glances, their professional pride wounded, their years of training screaming in protest. This was an unprecedented, reckless gamble,
a leap of faith into the vast unknown, propelled by the raw, untamed force of parental love. They knew it was illogical, dangerous even, but in the face of inevitable tragedy, rationality had crumbled. Stripped bare of all illusions by their daughter's imminent demise, the Sterlings had chosen to bet everything on the most improbable, the most bewildering of last resorts. Elara, still and resolute, offered only a faint, almost imperceptible nod. The true clash of worlds, the battle for a life, was only just beginning. Before any healing could commence, the medical team, under strict orders but still clinging to their protocols, subjected Elara to a battery of tests. They drew her blood, analyzed her vitals, scanned her body with the very instruments that had failed Lily. Elara submitted to each procedure with a quiet dignity, her calm an unsettling counterpoint to the hurried efficiency of the nurses and the grim, scrutinizing expressions of the doctors. Her blood, under the microscope, appeared ordinary, yet some subtle markers baffled the lab technicians. Trace elements, an unusual cellular resilience, nothing immediately conclusive, but enough to spark a flicker of professional curiosity beneath their thick layers of skepticism. Her heart rate was exceptionally steady, her breathing deep and rhythmic, almost meditative, even under the stress of the fluorescent lights and probing instruments. The doctors, however, found no grand anomaly, no scientific explanation for the bold claim she had made. They filed the results away, concluding that any potential healing would at best be a profound psychological effect, a placebo, a desperate illusion born of grief. Finally, the moment arrived. Lily lay in a specialized medical bed, her fragile form almost lost amidst a tangle of tubes and monitors that sustained her faltering life. The tent, usually bustling, was hushed, save for the low hum of medical equipment and the Sterling's shallow, anxious breaths. The air was thick with expectation, hope, and an almost suffocating skepticism. Dr. Anya Sharma, the lead pediatric specialist, positioned a small, sterile partition between Lily's bed and the rest of the room, a professional boundary to mitigate against contamination or, as she privately thought, against the futility of what was about to unfold. Elara, dressed in a plain, simple tunic, walked to Lily's bedside, her movements fluid and unhurried. She did not bring vials or modern instruments. Her tools were unseen, unheard by the medical world. She took Lily's tiny, emaciated hand in hers, her touch incredibly gentle, almost ethereal. Then she began, not with a dramatic gesture, but with a sound, soft at first, a low melodic hum that seemed to resonate from deep within her chest. It was an ancient sound, unlike anything the Sterlings or the doctors had ever heard, a complex tapestry of tones, pitches, and rhythms that seemed to carry the weight of forgotten epochs. Her eyes, usually so serene, closed, and her face took on an almost luminous quality in the dim light.
The chant grew, weaving through the sterile air an intricate, hypnotic melody that seemed to bypass the ears and settled directly into the very core of those present. It was not religious in the conventional sense, nor purely musical. It was a resonance, a vibration, a living sound that spoke of mountains and rivers, of sunlight filtering through ancient leaves, of life's enduring pulse. The doctors watched, utterly bewildered. Their minds, trained in empirical evidence and verifiable data, struggled to categorize this phenomena. It was neither medication nor surgery. It was simply sound. They expected nothing, perhaps a fleeting moment of calm for Lily, induced by the soothing vibrations, but nothing more. Yet as Elara's chant filled the room, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift occurred. The air itself seemed to grow denser, heavier, imbued with an unnameable energy. A faint warmth emanated from Elara, spreading outwards like ripples in a still pond. One of the monitors, displaying Lily's complex brainwaves, flickered, an almost imperceptible irregularity that the technicians dismissed as a momentary glitch.
Mr. Sterling felt an inexplicable tingling sensation in his fingertips, a strange quietness settling over his usually racing thoughts. Mrs. Sterling, tears streaming down her face, found her despair momentarily replaced by a fragile, terrifying hope, a whisper in her soul that refused to be silenced. The chant continued, wrapping itself around Lily, around everyone in the tent, a silent, profound challenge to the very fabric of their understanding. The clash had begun in earnest, and the sterile room, once a sanctuary of science, now thrummed with the vibrant, inexplicable energy of something far older, far deeper than any of them could comprehend. The true battle, the clash of worlds, was only just beginning. The silence that had descended upon the sterile tent, once broken only by the rhythmic beeping of monitors and Elara's ancient chant, stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Hours bled into one another, marked only by the shifting shadows cast by the fluorescent lights and the increasing strain on the faces of the medical staff. Elara, having completed her mysterious ritual, whether it was the transference of her unique blood or the final reverberations of her melodic words, had retreated to a corner, a serene, almost detached observer amidst the brewing storm of scientific disbelief. Her presence, however, was still a palpable force, a quiet anchor in a room teetering on the edge of the unfathomable. The lead physician, Dr. Eris Thorne, a man whose career was built on empirical data and quantifiable results, had initially dismissed the faint monitor flicker as nothing more than an artifact, a minor disturbance in the complex network of sensors. His team, though maintaining their vigilant watch over Lily, shared their professional cynicism, attributing the Sterling's quiet hope to the desperation of grief. But as the minutes turned into a second hour, then a third, an unsettling regularity began to emerge from the data scrolling across the screens. A junior nurse, double-checking the central console, frowned. "Dr. Thorne," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper against the hum of machinery. "Lily's heart rate, it's stabilized. And the arrhythmia, it's less frequent." Thorne scoffed, approaching the monitor with an air of practiced disbelief. "Coincidence, nurse, a momentary reprieve. These conditions often have erratic fluctuations before the inevitable." But as he spoke, his eyes widened almost imperceptibly. The red peaks and troughs on the ECG, once violently erratic, now showed a calmer, more consistent rhythm. He tapped the screen, checked the leads, then cross-referenced with another monitor. No errors, just stability. A shiver, cold and unwelcome, traced its way down his spine. The air in the tent seemed to thicken, a subtle shift in pressure, an almost imperceptible scent of damp earth and unfamiliar herbs replacing the usual antiseptic tang. Then came the second anomaly. Lily's fever, a persistent, raging inferno that had defied the most potent antipyretics, began to recede. Slowly at first, a fraction of a degree, then another, until the digital thermometer displayed a reading that sent a ripple of bewildered whispers through the team. 99.3, a technician breathed, eyes glued to the display. It was 104 just 2 hours ago. Dr. Anya Sharma, the specialist in genetic disorders, adjusted her glasses, her analytical mind scrambling for a logical explanation. Perhaps a delayed reaction to the last dosage of corticosteroids, though it's an unprecedented drop for her condition. Her voice lacked conviction. The Sterlings, who had been sitting vigil, Mrs. Sterling still clutching her husband's hand, watched the unfolding drama with a terror that warred with a burgeoning, almost blasphemous hope, a whisper in their soul that refused to be silenced. Mr. Sterling felt the tingling in his fingertips intensify, spreading through his arm, a strange internal resonance with the room's shifting energy. The impossible continued to unfold. a senior pathologist poring over the real-time cellular imaging of Lily's tissues, suddenly gasped, a sound torn from his throat. "Impossible," he croaked, his voice cracking. "These slides, the cellular degeneration, it's reversing. I'm seeing early signs of regeneration. The mitochondrial activity, it's improving." He practically tore off his gloves, grabbing another set of slides, pushing them under the microscope, his hands trembling.
The other doctors crowded around, their faces a tableau of increasingly stark bewilderment. The deterioration that had been relentless. The relentless march towards irreversible organ failure was not only halting, but showing signs of retreat. It was akin to watching a shattered vase spontaneously reassemble itself. This defied every single principle of biology and medicine they had ever known. Every textbook, every clinical trial, every peer-reviewed study. Panic began to mingle with profound bewilderment. The carefully constructed edifice of their scientific understanding was crumbling around them. Dr. Thorne, his earlier cynicism utterly shattered, felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. His heart hammered against his ribs, not with professional frustration, but with a primal, visceral terror. This isn't possible, he stammered, his voice thin, almost childlike. There's no medical explanation. No known compound, no biological pathway could achieve this. His eyes darted to Elara, still seated calmly in the corner, observing them with an unreadable expression. Her gaze held no triumph, no superiority, only a deep, quiet knowing. The medical instruments, once symbols of their control and understanding, now seemed to mock them with their impossible readings. The sterilized air of the tent, once an emblem of scientific precision, now felt charged with an ancient, untamed power. The doctors, once guardians of quantifiable truth, were now witnesses to a phenomenon that stripped them bare of all their knowledge, leaving them adrift in a sea of the incomprehensible. The battle was far from over. It had merely begun to reveal its utterly bewildering, awe-inspiring, and terrifying scope. The medical team was in disarray. Dr. Vance, usually a pillar of stoic professionalism, clutched his chest as if to contain a burgeoning panic. The other specialists, equally flummoxed, scrambled to recalibrate instruments, recheck Lily's charts, and murmur in hushed, disbelieving tones. The impossible readings continued to flood their screens. Lily's fever, which had raged unabated for weeks, was now normal. Her heart rate, once erratic and weak, beat with a steady, strong rhythm. The cellular degeneration, previously an inexorable march to oblivion, had not only halted, but was showing undeniable, albeit nascent, signs of reversal. Mrs. Sterling, tears streaming down her face, collapsed into her husband's arms, not from grief, but from an overwhelming, suffocating wave of relief that threatened to steal her breath. Mr. Sterling, usually composed even in the direst corporate crises, found himself unable to speak, simply clutching his wife and staring at the monitors, a raw, primal hope burning in his eyes, a hope he had long since buried. Elara remained where she was, a quiet sentinel. Her presence a stark contrast to the scientific chaos unfolding around her. Her eyes met Mr. Sterling's across the sterile expanse, and in that fleeting moment, he sensed not a miracle worker, but a conduit, a vessel for something profoundly older and wiser than any modern medicine. The Sterlings had imposed a strict media blackout around Lily's illness.
But the sheer unprecedented nature of this event shattered all their carefully constructed defenses. A junior nurse, overwhelmed by the inexplicable turnaround, made a tearful whispered call to her sister. A lab technician, still reeling from the data, shared his incredulity with a close friend in a medical journal. Within hours, the whisper became a roar. "Millionaire's daughter healed by mountain girl," screamed a tabloid headline. "Ancient cure defies science. Lily Sterling's recovery stuns doctors," proclaimed a more reputable news outlet. The story erupted like a supernova across every news platform, dominating airwaves and digital feeds, instantly eclipsing global conflicts and economic shifts. It was a human drama, an impossible triumph, and a direct challenge to the very tenets of modern healthcare. The world fractured into two distinct camps. On one side, millions, yearning for hope in a cynical age, hailed Elara as a modern-day saint, a beacon of spiritual or natural power capable of miracles. Her image, once a blurry photo taken by a drone, was now plastered everywhere, a symbol of faith against the odds. Donations poured into the Sterling's Foundation, not for Lily's treatment anymore, but for research into Elara's methods, whatever they might be. But the medical establishment, predictably, reacted with a mixture of outrage and profound skepticism. Esteemed professors and renowned researchers, their careers built on empirical evidence and peer-reviewed studies, dismissed the claims as utterly preposterous. They spoke of spontaneous remission, misdiagnosis, or more sinisterly, elaborate hoaxes designed to promote unproven, dangerous alternative therapies. Medical ethics committees launched investigations demanding full transparency, accusing Elara of quackery and the Sterlings of reckless endangerment. Op-eds filled journals and newspapers, dissecting the phenomenon, some arguing for a paradigm shift, others fiercely defending the scientific method against what they perceived as an assault of baseless superstition. The term Elara effect entered the lexicon, a loaded phrase that simultaneously evoked wonder and derision. Amidst the global cacophony, the Sterlings remained singularly focused on their daughter and the young woman who had brought her back from the brink.
Overjoyed beyond words, they approached Elara, their gratitude manifesting in the only way they knew how to express profound value, through immense wealth and influence. Mr. Sterling, his voice thick with emotion, offered Elara a blank check, a trust fund beyond comprehension, access to any resource she could ever need. "Elara," he began, his eyes brimming, "you have given us back our daughter. You have given Lily a future. There is nothing we wouldn't do for you. Name your price. We want to understand what you did, how you did it. We want to fund your research, build you a foundation, share your gift with the world. Imagine the lives you could save, the suffering you could alleviate. We can provide the infrastructure, the laboratories, the finest minds. We can protect your community, ensure its prosperity for generations." Mrs. Sterling, equally fervent, added, "You could be famous, Elara. Not just famous, but revered. Your name could be synonymous with healing, with hope. Think of the good you could do." They saw in Elara not just a healer, but a potential revolutionary, a figure who could reshape the future of medicine, and they were prepared to pour every ounce of their vast resources into unraveling her secret, believing that such a profound gift, if understood and replicated, belonged to all humanity. The silence that followed their impassioned plea was heavy, pregnant with expectation, yet Elara's expression remained as unreadable as the mountain peaks that cradled her distant home. She simply listened, her gaze unwavering, her quiet understanding a stark contrast to the dizzying world they now offered her.
The stage was set not just for a medical breakthrough, but for a clash of worlds, values, and definitions of healing itself. Elara's gaze remained steady, meeting the Sterling's expectant eyes across the opulent hospital room, a space buzzing with the hum of machinery and the sharp scent of antiseptic. The air grew still as Elara finally spoke, her voice, soft as a mountain breeze, carrying an ancient gravity that cut through the silence. "Mr. and Mrs. Sterling," she began, "the life of Lily is a precious gift. To aid in its return to health is my reward. My people's knowledge, passed down through generations, is not for sale. It is a sacred trust, a responsibility to honor the balance of life, not to be bought, replicated, or profited from." The Sterlings stared, their world, usually so malleable, momentarily fractured. We don't understand," Mr. Sterling stammered, his composure slipping. "We speak of an endowment, a foundation in your name, resources to protect your village, to bring your wisdom to the world, to cure others like Lily." Mrs. Sterling, distressed, added, "You saved our daughter, Elara. We owe you everything. This isn't about profit. It's about sharing a miracle, about healing." She reached out, but Elara subtly withdrew, her respect for boundaries clear. "The balance of life," Elara reiterated, her gaze sweeping from the anxious parents to Lily, then to the sterile equipment. "Our healing is connected to the earth, to the spirit of the mountains. It is not something to be extracted, bottled, or taught in laboratories. It is a way of living, a reverence. To commodify it, to dissect it, would destroy its essence, severing its roots from the very soil that gives it life. It is not mine alone to give. It belongs to my ancestors, to the land itself." Her eyes softened as she looked at Lily's peaceful face. "My concern is only for Lily's continued strength, for the peace of her spirit, and for the integrity of my heritage, which must remain untouched by your world's clamor." The Sterlings exchanged bewildered glances. This was no negotiation. It was a clash of fundamentally different values, a chasm between worldviews they hadn't known existed. Elara's disinterest in their definition of success, her unshakable refusal of modern exchange, was incomprehensible. It wasn't just a rejection of money, it was a rejection of their entire paradigm. The notion that all knowledge could be acquired, owned, or disseminated conventionally. The medical team, observing, felt a new wave of bewilderment. They had anticipated demands, never this quiet defiance. Her refusal, however, inadvertently forged a new, complex layer of intrigue and anxiety. If Elara's gift couldn't be bought, couldn't be conventionally studied, what did that mean for Lily's future? And for a world desperately seeking answers? The Sterlings, accustomed to every door opening for their influence, found themselves at an impasse. Their initial joy was now tinged with gnawing apprehension. What if Lily's condition returned? What if the cure was inextricably tied to Elara and her inscrutable ways, and she simply retreat, taking her secrets back to the mountains? The thought was terrifying. They had saved their daughter, yes, but now faced losing the understanding of how, a mystery heavier than the illness itself. The world watched, expecting them to unveil the secret. Instead, they confronted a formidable woman, holding a key not in her hands, but in her very being, refusing to turn the lock for all their wealth or pleas for scientific progress. Her unwavering commitment to ancestral ways became the new, unexpected challenge, shifting the narrative from miraculous recovery to an ethical and philosophical standoff played out on a global stage. The Sterlings now grasped that Elara's gift came with an unwritten contract, demanding respect for an entirely different kind of wealth, the priceless currency of tradition and natural harmony. The true battle, it seemed, had just begun.
The global stage held its breath, still reeling from the medical anomaly that was Lily Sterling. The Sterlings themselves lived in a gilded cage of gratitude and gnawing fear. Elara's refusal to commodify her gift, as profound as it was, left them suspended between the joy of their daughter's recovery and the terror of its unexplained impermanence. The silence that followed Elara's firm rejection of their offers was louder than any broadcast, a testament to her unyielding commitment to principles that wealth could not touch. But the scientific community, initially fragmented by skepticism and awe, began to coalesce. A distinct faction emerged, not driven by the Sterling's reward, nor by a desire for exploitation, but by a pure, unadulterated scientific curiosity, ignited by the irrefutable evidence of Lily's thriving health. These were not the cynical experts who had initially dismissed Elara. This select group comprised researchers whose careers had been marked by pushing boundaries, by looking beyond the conventional. Dr. Eris Thorne, a theoretical biologist known for his controversial work on quantum biology, led the delegation. He approached Elara not with scalpels and sterile vials, but with an open mind, a genuine humility, and an almost philosophical reverence for the unknown. Their initial encounters were less about medical examination and more about dialogue, an intricate dance between vastly different worldviews. Elara, ever watchful, sensed the authenticity in Thorne's eyes, a stark contrast to the sterile, transactional gaze of previous specialists. She permitted them observation, under strict conditions, no invasive procedures, no attempts to extract her knowledge by force, and all findings to be shared openly, respectfully, and framed within the context of her ancestral practices. The Sterlings, present as anxious facilitators, witnessed the painstaking process. It was slow, frustrating at times, as ancient lore clashed with modern empirical methods. Elara spoke of energies, of cosmic alignments, of a symbiotic relationship with nature that was the source of her healing. Thorne's team, in turn, sought quantifiable data, searching for the bridge between the mystical and the measurable. They began with meticulous, non-invasive studies, detailed blood analyses, with samples willingly provided by Elara but under her watchful eye, physiological monitoring during her contemplative states, and the subtle, almost imperceptible effects when she focused her intent, sometimes whispering low melodic phrases known only to her people. The results, when they began to surface, were not merely unexpected, they were profoundly unsettling. Elara's blood, initially appearing normal, revealed unprecedented biological markers under advanced spectroscopic analysis. Her erythrocytes exhibited an anomalous resilience, a structural integrity far beyond typical human cells, almost as if engineered to resist degradation and environmental stressors. More disturbingly, micro-level studies detected a peculiar, highly organized energy signature emanating from her cells, a vibrational frequency unlike anything recorded in human biology. It was not merely a unique blood type, it was a fundamental deviation, a cellular architecture that defied known genetic and physiological norms. When Elara engaged in her chance, the physiological responses were equally perplexing. Her brain activity, measured by sophisticated neuroimaging, showed patterns of synchronous wave activity across regions of the brain normally disparate, indicative of an extraordinary state of interconnectedness and conscious control. There were surges of bioelectrical activity that mirrored, yet profoundly exceeded phenomena observed in advanced meditative states, and these surges seemed to momentarily alter the local electromagnetic field around her. The scientists, initially striving for objective detachment, found themselves grappling with a new kind of awe, tinged with intellectual panic. Dr. Thorne, usually stoic, paced his makeshift lab, running and rerunning the tests, convinced there had to be an error. But the data was consistent, irrefutable.
Elara was not merely gifted, her very being was a living anomaly, a biological paradox that shattered their understanding of human potential and the laws of nature. The unprecedented biological markers were not just indicators, they were mechanisms, suggesting a deeper, inherent capacity. The unexpected physiological responses were not just reactions, they were activations, hinting at a conscious manipulation of these extraordinary properties. The question was no longer if she had done it, but how, and the answers were proving far more radical than any fringe theory had ever dared to propose. The chasm between ancient wisdom and cutting-edge science hadn't merely been bridged, it had been revealed as a much narrower gap than previously imagined, with Elara standing firmly at the point of convergence, a living testament to a truth humanity had forgotten, or perhaps had never truly known. Lily Sterling, once a fragile whisper of life clinging desperately to existence, blossomed anew with each passing day. Her eyes, previously clouded by pain, now sparkled with a child's vibrant curiosity, rediscovering the world. Medical monitors, once charting her decline, now displayed perfect vital signs, each beat and breath a testament to a biological recalibration defying every established textbook.
Her cells, riddled with the genetic anomaly, had not merely stabilized, they had undergone a profound, almost alchemical transformation, shedding disease markers and regenerating with unprecedented vigor. Doctors, still reeling from Elara's unique biology, could only observe, meticulously documenting a recovery both exhilarating and unsettling. It felt less like healing and more like a gentle, fundamental reprogramming of life itself. The chasm of understanding widened, even as Lily's laughter echoed through the sterile halls, a sound previously thought impossible. Amidst the scientific fervor and the global media storm, a quiet, profound connection solidified between Elara and the Sterling family. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, accustomed to a world of transactional relationships, found themselves drawn to Elara's unassuming strength and profound wisdom. She moved through their gilded world with unshakable serenity, her eyes seeing beyond their opulence to raw human emotion. They spoke for hours, not of medical protocols, but of life's rhythm, the interconnectedness of all things, the ancient stories of her people that wove nature and spirit into an inseparable tapestry. Elara, in turn, saw past their immense wealth to vulnerable, deeply loving parents, offering solace and a perspective they had never encountered. The initial gratitude morphed into something far deeper, an unspoken understanding transcending their disparate origins. Lily herself gravitated towards Elara, finding comfort in her gentle presence, an instinctive recognition of the life force that had brought her back. Elara was no longer merely the healer, she had become an indispensable part of their lives, a quiet anchor in a world turned upside down. The Sterlings' opulent mansion, once a fortress of meticulously constructed lives, began to subtly transform. The endless pursuit of more, the meticulous planning of social climbing, the anxiety about their financial empire, all these dominant currents started to recede, replaced by a nascent appreciation for a different kind of richness. Mr. Sterling, once priding himself on ruthless pragmatism, found himself contemplating the value of a sunrise, the intricate dance of a spider's web, concepts Elara spoke of with reverence. Mrs. Sterling, whose days were once dictated by galas and investments, began spending quiet afternoons with Lily, simply observing her daughter's joyful rediscovery of simple pleasures, feeling a profound contentment she had never known. Their vast wealth, once their greatest tool, now felt like a heavy burden, a stark reminder of its ultimate uselessness in the face of true despair. Elara, by her mere presence and gentle counsel, had irrevocably shifted their paradigm, demonstrating that genuine value lay not in accumulation, but in connection, in health, and the delicate balance of life itself. This quiet revolution within their souls was an unexpected twist, a deeper healing than even Lily's miraculous recovery, challenging the very foundations of their identity, suggesting a future where their influence and resources might be directed not towards more, but towards something truly meaningful. The world watched Lily's physical rebirth, but only the Sterlings understood the quiet, profound rebirth of their own spirits. The quiet revolution within the Sterling souls rippled outwards. Elara's ancestral community, once dismissed as mere folklore, now gained unprecedented global recognition. Guided by Elara's profound wisdom and the Sterlings' enlightened patronage, their secluded village transformed into a beacon, fostering a deep, unexpected appreciation for indigenous knowledge and holistic healing practices long marginalized by modern society. The medical world, initially steeped in skepticism, could no longer ignore the undeniable evidence of Lily's complete and baffling recovery. Groundbreaking research, spearheaded by the select group of open-minded scientists, began to unravel the complex interplay between subtle energies, unique biological markers, and genetic expression, leading to unprecedented breakthroughs in understanding and treating other rare, debilitating conditions previously deemed incurable. The story of Lily and Elara transcended mere medical anomaly. It became a powerful global symbol of hope, a poignant testament that true solutions often lie far beyond the sterile confines of conventional thought, within nature's untamed depths, and in the hearts of people least expected to hold the keys to humanity's deepest mysteries. The Sterling Empire, now radically redefined, channeled its vast resources into establishing global initiatives that robustly bridged ancient wisdom with cutting-edge science, ensuring Elara's transformative legacy flourished for generations. Their extraordinary journey, born from the deepest despair, culminated not in the accumulation of more, but in the profound realization that true wealth lay in shared knowledge, enduring connection, and the boundless potential for healing that emerged when humanity dared to look beyond its own perceived limits. The impossible was merely the not yet understood, and a young girl's life had sparked a revolution of mind and spirit across the entire world. This profound journey, stretching beyond the boundaries of convention, has reached its tender conclusion. If Elara and Lily's story touched your heart, we invite you to honor their legacy by pressing the like button, subscribing for more captivating narratives that challenge the expected, and sharing your insights in the comments below. Your support makes all the difference.